Over 2,000 strikes in just 45 days. Tanks disabled, drones swarming, and one of the region's most advanced militaries forced into a grinding, unpredictable fight in the hills of South Lebanon. This isn't yesterday's headline. It's a deeper story most summaries miss. And what actually happened on that front is more complex and more consequential than it first appears. If you want daily, clear breakdowns of conflicts that shape the world, follow now, because this one changes how you should read every update coming out of the region. This conflict didn't begin where most reports start. It didn't begin with a single strike or a single decision. It began years earlier, through preparation, deterrence, and a regional power struggle that never truly cooled. When tensions escalated in 2024, the question wasn't whether Hezbollah would act, it was when and how. And when that moment came, the decision to open a northern front wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, tied to survival, influence, and long-term positioning. Stay with me, because the next detail most coverage skips is exactly what shaped the battlefield and why it caught so many off guard. If you want this level of analysis daily, make sure you're following now. What unfolded next surprised even experienced observers. The expectation was a conventional confrontation, air power, armored movement, rapid dominance. Instead, the terrain itself became part of the strategy. Years of preparation had turned villages, hills, and underground networks into a layered defensive system. Decentralized command structures meant that disabling one node didn't collapse operations. This wasn't improvisation. It was structured, trained, and designed for resilience under pressure. Then came the tactical shift that changed the tempo. Small, low-cost drones, often operated by a single individual, began appearing across the battlefield. These weren't large, easily detectable systems. They were fast, precise, and difficult to counter at scale. Footage from multiple locations showed strikes on armored vehicles, artillery positions, and communication units. The effect wasn't just physical damage. It disrupted coordination, slowed movement, and forced constant adaptation. But here's the number that reframes everything. In roughly 45 days, more than 2,000 operations were recorded, an average of over 40 per day. That level of sustained pressure matters. It means no predictable rhythm, no extended recovery window, and no stable rear area. It forces a military into a reactive posture where decisions are made under constant pressure, and that changes outcomes over time. If you're following this closely and want updates like this every day, not weeks later, follow now. Equipment losses became part of the conversation, though exact figures remain contested. Claims from one side and cautious silence from the other are expected in any conflict. But independent assessments, satellite analysis, and reporting from the ground pointed to a consistent conclusion. The operational cost was higher than anticipated, and in modern warfare, cost isn't just measured in hardware, it's measured in tempo, fatigue, and strategic flexibility. There's also a symbolic layer that often goes unnoticed. Certain systems carry meaning beyond their function. When advanced armored platforms are damaged or disabled, the impact extends beyond the battlefield. It influences perception, domestic, regional, and international. And in an era where footage circulates instantly, perception becomes part of the conflict itself. Behind the front lines, broader strategy was at play. Support networks, training pipelines, and long-term planning shaped the capabilities on display. This wasn't a short-term buildup. It reflected years of investment in asymmetric tactics designed to offset conventional advantages. The objective wasn't necessarily decisive victory. It was to impose cost, maintain pressure, and shape the narrative of resilience. And that brings us to the human dimension. Civilian areas were affected, infrastructure was damaged, and international organizations documented incidents involving medical personnel and critical services. These elements carry weight beyond immediate impact. They influence diplomatic pressure, global opinion, and long-term stability. When infrastructure is hit and communities are displaced, the consequences extend far beyond the battlefield. Financially, the strain adds another layer. Estimates suggest the total cost of operations, disruptions, and damages reached into the tens of billions of dollars. Sustaining that level of expenditure while managing multiple fronts creates internal pressure, economic, political, and strategic. And that pressure shapes decision-making in ways that aren't always visible in headlines. Then came the ceasefire, brief, fragile, and immediately tested. Announced as a pause, it reflected a moment where continuing operations carried increasing cost for both sides. But a pause isn't resolution. Reports of violations, continued strikes, and repositioning made it clear that underlying tensions remained unchanged. This wasn't an ending, it was a recalibration point. Internally, leadership faced difficult questions. Strategic objectives, operational outcomes, and public expectations don't always align. When results fall short of initial goals, narratives shift toward future plans, toward external criticism, or toward reframing the situation. That dynamic is a constant in prolonged conflicts. At the same time, the broader regional picture continued evolving. External powers monitored developments closely, balancing interests, alliances, and long-term positioning. Energy routes, trade stability, and geopolitical influence all intersect in this space, and every escalation or pause feeds into that larger equation. What makes this situation particularly complex is the absence of a clear long-term resolution framework. Diplomatic mechanisms exist, but enforcement remains limited. Competing objectives remain unresolved, and when those conditions persist, conflicts don't disappear. They pause, shift, and eventually resurface. On the ground, life continues under uncertainty. Displaced residents return to damaged areas, rebuilding where possible, adapting where necessary. That resilience shapes the local environment and influences the strategic landscape in ways that aren't always captured in official statements. So where does that leave us now? A temporary pause, an active reassessment on all sides, and a situation where the next phase depends on decisions being made quietly, away from cameras. Maps are being studied, lessons are being drawn, and strategies are being adjusted. Because this isn't a closed chapter, it's a transition point. And the real question isn't what just happened, it's what happens next, and whether anything fundamentally changes. If you want clear, fact-based breakdowns like this every single day, not delayed or simplified, follow now and stay ahead of the story. And if this helped you understand what's really happening, consider subscribing. It's the easiest way to keep getting accurate daily analysis without the noise.